Today, our Tim's knowledge nugget is one that almost everyone in IT has heard of, but rarely gets a clear explanation. What exactly is Microsoft Entra Connect? Is it just another tool with a new name, or does it solve a problem you might already have in your company? Imagine you sign into your work laptop in the office. Then you open Teams, Outlook, or OneDrive, and suddenly you need another account or another password. Or someone in IT has to create you again. Same person, but two records somehow. For years, many companies kept their staff directory inside the building with Active Directory, while Microsoft 365 used Microsoft Entra ID in the cloud. Both places needed to know who you were, what your email address was, and whether you still worked there. Without a connection between them, people ended up with duplicate accounts. Password resets took longer. A new employee could sign into Windows but still wait for access to Teams or email. Hero, Timaz, the simplest definition. Microsoft Entra Connect is the controlled bridge between those two identity systems. By the end of this knowledge nugget, you will understand how that bridge keeps staff records in sync, how people sign in, and how IT checks whether the connection still works. Letauben start by looking at the two places it connects. The two identity homes Letauben break it down into the major components. Start with Active Directory. Active Directory is the staff directory that many companies keep on their own network. It usually lives on servers the company manages, often in its own building or data center. Think of it as the local records room in an office building. Inside that records room, the company keeps a record for each employee or their name, job title, department, work email address, and the groups they belong to. It also helps control access inside the local network. When you turn on a company Windows laptop and sign in with your work account, Active Directory may check who you are. When you open a shared folder for your department, it may decide whether you can enter that folder. For a long time, this covered most of a company ITM's daily work. You signed into Windows, used local file shares, and printed documents. Your work account lived mostly inside the company network. Then work moved beyond the building. Email shifted to Exchange Online. Meetings moved into Teams. Personal work files landed in OneDrive, and team files started living in SharePoint. People could work from home, from a client site, or from a phone in a coffee shop. Those cloud services need a directory too. That directory is Microsoft Entra ID. Microsoft Entra ID is the cloud reception desk for Microsoft 365. When you sign into Teams, Exchange Online, SharePoint, or OneDrive, Entra ID checks your identity and decides whether you can enter. Picture a large office building with a reception desk at the entrance. The receptionist checks your pass. Then the building rules decide which rooms you can use. You might enter the Teams meeting room, your Exchange Online mailbox, or a SharePoint team site, while another person can enter a different set of rooms. Most users never see this reception desk. They just type their work email address and password, then open the app they need. Behind the scenes, Entra ID handles the cloud sign-in and cloud access. So where does the problem appear? A company might still rely on Active Directory for Windows sign-ins and local folders, while also relying on Entra ID for Microsoft 365. That setup is called hybrid identity. Hybrid identity simply means the company uses both identity homes at the same time. One sits on the company network, and the other sits in Microsoft OTM's cloud. Imagine a new employee called Alex joins the company. HR enters AlexAu TMS details, and IT creates AlexAu TMS account in Active Directory. Alex can now sign into a Windows laptop and reach the right local folders. But Alex also needs an email mailbox, Teams meetings, OneDrive files, and access to SharePoint. Creating a completely separate cloud account for Alex would create extra work and extra risk. Someone would need to keep the name, email address, department, and account status correct in two places. That opens how records slowly drift apart. Alex changes department in one system but not the other. Alex leaves the company, one account is disabled, and another account still exists. Or Alex forgets which password belongs to which sign-in. Entra Connect keeps the two records linked. Notice that Alex does appear in two places, Active Directory and Entra IDAO. But those records represent one employee, not two unrelated accounts. For synced users, Active Directory normally remains the source of authority. In plain English, that means the local record is the main filing cabinet for details such as AlexAu TMS name, department, and account status. If IT changes AlexAu TMS department locally, that change should travel to the cloud. Editing the same synced detail directly in Entra ID can either fail or get replaced later by the local value. That sounds strict, but it prevents two filing cabinets from arguing over which record is correct. Entra Connect moves selected identity information from Active Directory to Entra ID. Entra ID then handles access to cloud services such as Microsoft 365, Teams, Exchange Online, SharePoint, and OneDrive. One tool connects the records and the other controls cloud access. Next, we need to see how that bridge decides who and what can cross. Building block 1. Sync. So here's how this starts. Entra Connect Sync runs on a Windows server inside the company network. Picture that server as a guarded bridge office between the local directory and Microsoft Entra ID. It doesn't ask every record to cross. Instead, it checks the rules, looks for what changed, and sends only the right information to the cloud. That control matters a lot. A local Active Directory has more than just current employees, old test accounts, service accounts that software uses, disabled accounts, training accounts, records that only exist for local work. They're all in there. Most companies don't want all of that inside Microsoft 365. So during setup, IT chooses which users, groups, contacts, and details should sync. The rule can be simple. Pick certain organizational units, often called OUs. An organizational unit is basically a folder inside Active Directory. Think of it like the local staff directory has folders called finance, sales, HR, and IT. The company might sync those folders because the people inside them need Microsoft 365. Another folder, maybe test accounts or local services, stays local. Only the chosen folders cross the bridge. That keeps the cloud directory cleaner, and it lowers the chance that an old local system account suddenly appears in Teams or Microsoft 365. Entra Connect also doesn't copy every detail from every selected record. The staff record holds lots of information. Some of it helps Microsoft 365 work properly. A name, work email address, department, group membership. Other details stay local because the company has no reason to send them to the cloud. It's like preparing a staff file for another office. You don't photocopy every page just because one department needs the employee's name and job title. You send the pages they need, following the rules the company chose during setup. This all runs quietly behind the scenes. In a typical setup, Entra Connect checks for changes about every 30 minutes. It sends the differences, not the entire directory over and over. So if only Alex's department changes, Entra Connect focuses on that one change. It doesn't need to rebuild every employee record in Entra ID just because Alex moved from sales to marketing. Let's follow Alex on their first day. HR records Alex's name, department, and other starter details. Then IT creates Alex's account in the local Active Directory and places it in an organizational unit that syncs to Microsoft Entra ID. At the next sync, Entra Connect sees a new staff record that matches its rules. It creates or connects Alex's cloud identity in Entra ID, ready for Microsoft 365. If IT later corrects Alex's display name, changes the department, adds Alex to a group, updates an email detail, or disables the local account, Entra Connect sends those changes across too. That's the day-to-day job of sync. Names move across, group membership can move across, email details move across, account status moves across. And that last one deserves attention. If someone leaves the company and IT disables their local account, the matching cloud account needs to receive that change. A working sync keeps access tied to the person's real job status instead of relying on someone to remember two separate updates. But sync has a clear limit. Entra Connect doesn't assign a Microsoft 365 license just because it creates Alex's cloud account. It also doesn't create a mailbox by itself. Those are separate tasks. A license gives Alex access to the services the company pays for. Exchange Online then uses that license to create the mailbox. Entra Connect brings across the identity, while Microsoft 365 services use that identity once the right access and license are in place. This separation confuses people at first. They see Alex appear in Entra ID, then expect a mailbox to appear at the same moment. But the cloud account is the staff record at reception. The license decides which workrooms Alex can actually use. The local Active Directory stays as the main filing cabinet for synced employees. So if Alex's job title or department changes, IT normally updates it there. Entra Connect carries the change to Entra ID. That prevents two people editing two records and slowly creating a mismatch. There's another small job happening behind the scenes. When Alex already exists in the cloud, Entra Connect needs to know which cloud record belongs to which local record. It uses matching details built into the identity records, so it updates the right Alex rather than creating a second account with a similar name. That's why this isn't just copying names from one place to another. It's maintaining a link between two records that represent the same person. But copied identity details only solve half the problem. Alex also needs a way to prove they're really Alex when signing in. Building block 2. Authentication sync can place Alex's work identity in Entra ID, but a record alone can't sign in. Authentication is the check that proves Alex is really Alex when they type a work email address and password into Teams, Outlook, or any other Microsoft 365 service. Think about a company where Alex signs into a Windows laptop in the morning, then opens Outlook and Teams. Nobody wants Alex to remember one password for the local network and a different password for Microsoft 365. That's the practical goal. One work identity, one familiar password, access to the places Alex needs for work. Entra Connect helps the local directory and Entra ID use a chosen sign-in method. There are a few options, and their names can sound more complicated than the idea behind them. The option most companies use is password hash synchronization. The name sounds alarming at first because it includes the word password. But Entra Connect doesn't copy Alex's readable password into the cloud. Nobody opens Entra ID and sees Alex's password written down. Instead, Active Directory stores password information in a protected form. Entra Connect takes that protected information, applies another protected step, and sends the result to Entra ID. Entra ID can then check whether the password Alex enters is correct without needing the local Active Directory server to answer every cloud sign-in request. Picture it like a lock that recognizes the right-shaped key but never keeps a copy of the key itself. With password hash synchronization, Entra ID checks Alex's Microsoft 365 sign-in. This is often called cloud authentication because the check happens in Microsoft's cloud. For most organizations, this is the usual choice. It keeps the sign-in experience simple, and it means Alex can often still reach Microsoft 365 if the local Office network or local Active Directory has a problem. The cloud can verify the sign-in without waiting for the company's local server. That doesn't mean the local directory stops mattering. It remains the place where Alex's password normally changes, and Entra Connect keeps the protected password information current in Entra ID. But when Alex signs into Microsoft 365, Entra ID handles the check. Some companies choose a different method called pass-through authentication. With this method, Entra ID receives Alex's sign-in request, then asks a secure agent inside the company network to check that password against local Active Directory. Entra ID is still involved, but the local directory gives the final yes or no for the password. You can think of it like calling a local office to confirm a visitor's details before allowing them into an online meeting. It fits companies that need the local directory to remain part of every password check, but it also means the local systems and the sign-in agents need to stay available. If that connection breaks, cloud sign-ins can become a problem. Then there is federation. Federation means another identity system handles the sign-in check. A company may already use a separate sign-in service with special rules, older business apps, smart cards, or other company-specific needs. In that setup, Entra ID hands Alex's sign-in over to that system, which checks the identity and sends Entra ID an answer. Federation can make sense, it just brings more moving parts, more planning, and more things that need support. That's why it usually appears in companies that already have a strong reason for it, rather than as the default choice for a new Microsoft 365 setup. So which option should you remember? Password hash. Synchronization fits most organizations because Entra ID can check Microsoft 365 sign-ins directly while users keep the same work password they know. Pass-through authentication fits cases where the local directory must check the password at sign-in. Federation fits companies with an existing sign-in system and rules they need to keep. The choice isn't about picking the fanciest name, it's about deciding where the password check happens and what the company needs to keep running. There's one common mix-up worth clearing up. Entra Connect doesn't replace multi-factor authentication, often called MFA. It also doesn't replace conditional access. Authentication answers the first question, is this really Alex? MFA asks for another proof, like approval in an app on Alex's phone. Conditional access checks the situation around the sign-in. Is Alex using a trusted device? Is the sign-in coming from an expected place? Does the company require extra proof before access? Entra ID handles those cloud security checks. Imagine Alex reaches reception with a work pass. Authentication checks that the pass belongs to Alex. MFA may ask Alex to confirm with the phone. Conditional access checks whether Alex can enter under the current conditions. Each part has its own job. Entra Connect helps bring the identity and chosen sign-in method together. Entra ID applies the cloud access rules after that. There's also a useful option called password writeback. Suppose Alex forgets a password while working from home and uses a Microsoft 365 self-service password reset page. With password writeback set up, that new password can travel back to the local Active Directory too. Alex changes the password once. Both the cloud and local work account stay in step. That feature needs deliberate setup, so it isn't something to switch on without understanding the company's rules, but it solves a very real problem for hybrid companies, especially when staff work away from the office. The sign-in path is only useful while it works. A bridge carrying staff access also needs someone watching for trouble. Building block 3, health. A connection can look fine until it stops working. Entra Connect Health is the monitoring layer. It watches the connection and gives IT early warning when something needs attention. Think of it like a status board in an operations room. Nobody has to stare at it all day, but somebody needs to know when a light changes from green to red. If the sync stops, if a server reports a problem, or if certain accounts fail to sync, health can raise an alert. Sync problems often start quietly, and that ow term matters why this matters. A new employee might not appear in Microsoft 365, or a department change might not reach the cloud, or a password change might not work as expected. Those are frustrating problems. But the serious problem shows up when someone leaves. Imagine Alex leaves the company on Friday afternoon. IT disables Alex's TMS account in local Active Directory, which should stop the matching cloud account from working too. The sync service stopped earlier that day, maybe after a server update or a connection problem. The local account is disabled, but the cloud account has now received that change. Alex could still have access to Microsoft 365 until someone notices the failed sync and fixes it. That gap is exactly why monitoring matters. It's not about keeping a dashboard tidy. It's about making sure access changes actually reach the place where people work. Entra Connect Health can help IT spot warnings before users start opening support tickets. It can point to a stopped sync service, failed attempts, server issues, or sign-in problems. Instead of waiting for someone to ask why they can't access their account, IT has a reason to check the connection first. You don't ultimately need to become an Entra Connect expert to understand the basic checks. Ask when the last successful sync ran and look for records that failed to sync. Check whether the server is healthy and whether the sync service is still running. Read unexpected error messages instead of assuming they'll fix themselves. That means the beginner view of health. It watches the moving parts and warns it when the link between the local directory and Entra ID needs attention. So sync carries record changes, authentication checks, sign-ins, and health watches whether those jobs keep working. But hybrid identity still has boundaries, and Entra Connect does no TMT solve every identity problem in a company. What Entra Connect does not do. Here is something important. Entra Connect is not a cloud backup of Active Directory. It sends selected identity details to Entra ID so Microsoft 365 can use them, but that does not mean Entra ID becomes a full copy of every local record, setting, or server configuration. If a company needs to recover local Active Directory after a serious problem, it needs a proper backup and recovery plan for Active Directory itself. Entra Connect also does not attempt to replace Microsoft Entra ID. Entra ID remains the cloud identity service for sign-ins and access. Entra Connect is the connection method for organizations that still keep Active Directory on their own network. If there are OTMs, no local Active Directory, there are OTMs, usually no need for Entra Connect. A cloud-only company can manage staff accounts directly in Entra ID. Installing Entra Connect would add complexity without solving a real problem. It also can attempt to clean up a messy directory by itself. If the local directory has duplicate names, old email addresses, or records that do not follow naming rules, Entra Connect will carry that information according to its own rules, but it can automatically decide which messy record is correct. Bad information can still travel. That is why companies should sort out obvious identity problems before syncing large groups, otherwise the cloud receives the same confusion that already exists locally. Entra Connect is also not the tool that creates every security rule. Entra ID handles sign-in controls. MFA asks for extra proof. Conditional access applies rules based on the situation. Intune manages devices. Defender watches for threats across the connected platform. Each tool has a separate job. Entra Connect connects a local identity to the cloud, but it does not replace the people, policies, or security tools that protect that identity once it reaches Microsoft 365. Another point catches many people out. Standard sync goes one way from local Active Directory to Entra ID. Itotomi is not a free-for-all two-way link where every cloud change writes back locally. That would create too many conflicting records and accidental changes. Some selected write-back features exist when a company sets them up deliberately, like password write-back. A cloud password reset can update the local password too, but only when configured. Write-back is the exception, not the default. You may also hear two similar names, Entra Connect Sync and Cloud Sync. Both connect local Active Directory with Entra ID, but in different ways. Entra Connect Sync runs inside the company network, and many hybrid organizations already rely on it. Cloud Sync uses lighter local agents and cloud-based management for the sync setup. Donautum pick based on which name sounds newer. Entra Connect Sync often fits established hybrid environments. Cloud Sync can suit other companies depending on how their directory is arranged and what they need to sync. The question is simple. Which connection method fits the company Autumn's real identity setup? With that boundary clear, we can return to Alex and see how sync, authentication, and health fit into one employee OTM is working day. One employee, one connected identity. Follow Alex from the moment HR adds a new starter record, AU. IT creates his account in local Active Directory, and Entra Connect carries that identity to Entra ID so he can use Teams, OneDrive, Exchange Online, and the rest of Microsoft 365 without anyone building a second account by hand. When Alex signs in, the chosen authentication method checks his familiar work password. Later, if Alex changes department, resets a password, or leaves the company, Health helps IT spot a problem if those changes don't travel as expected. Picture the whole setup as one office building O. Active Directory is the local records room, Entra ID is the cloud reception desk, Entra Connect is the guarded bridge between them, and Health is the monitoring desk watching the bridge. That's the magic of it. Everything stays in sync. So the answer to our opening question is that Entra Connect keeps local and cloud identities connected, so staff access never depends on duplicate manual account work. Now, how can you check whether this applies in your own company? Put the knowledge nugget to work. Here's the simplest way to think about it. Entra Connect is hybrid identity plumbing, not an app you open every day. Start by asking one simple question. Does your company still use local Active Directory? If it does, find out where staff accounts begin, where password checks happen, and who receives alerts when sync fails. Those three answers reveal the building blocks: sync, authentication, and health monitoring. And make sure you know who's watching that bridge. Don't change sync settings casually, because one small change can affect who appears in Microsoft 365 and who can access work services. Next, learn how Entra ID works as the cloud reception desk, then move on to MFA and conditional access. Remember, the real power isn't any single product AO, it's how they all work together. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and share this with a colleague moving from local servers to Microsoft 365.